Welcome to everybody here today. My name is General John Williams. I was one of the early settlers, but not one of the earliest pioneers to come to Salem. I didn't come to Salem until 1703. I came to this country as a ship's surgeon and bought a parcel of land over in Pollitt, Vermont. And I was over there running my small farm when I heard about a smallpox epidemic in the village of Salem. So I thought I would bring my doctoring services to Salem and try to help people who had smallpox. Smallpox was rampant. And what I discovered when I got here was that the owner of the James Turner, or Turner Tavern, as it was known, and his wife, Susan, were suffering from smallpox. I could not save James. He died from smallpox. A year later, I married his widow. It turned out that actually the tavern was probably one of the wealthiest piece of property in town. The Turners had a tavern in Pelham, Massachusetts also before they moved here, so it's just natural that they would build a tavern for people who needed a place to stay and to imbibe in the evening. Now, shortly after that, as you know, the Revolutionary War broke out. 1775, while I was in Salem, I got a message from General Schuyler asking me to raise a militia in Salem, and he would make me a colonel. He gave me the rank of colonel, and I raised 3 militia groups in Salem. Now, a militia at that time was not a lot of people. The population was not great in the area. If I could get 20 people to form a company, that would be something. If when I needed them I could get 10 people, that would be something. Because remember, these were not soldiers. They were not professional soldiers. They did not belong to the Continental Army. They were farmers. And at any given time of the year, they might be tied up trying to harvest their crops, and therefore they would not turn out in great numbers. However, the group of militia did end up going to Skenesboro, where Colonel Skene had his sort of plantation right on Lake Champlain. And they were going to attack his estate and capture him. So the Salem militia went up, but Skene was not there. But they did find other people there, and so they raided the plantation, and as happens during war, the spoils of war, they brought back with them some of the items from the Skene Manor. Now, they also told a story of finding in the basement of his house a lead casket in which his wife was buried. And the legend is that he did that because in the will of her parents it said all money that would go to her or to Skene would disappear when she died. So he never buried her. But they brought back other items, and in fact they brought back one of Skene's slaves to Salem at that time, a young girl, 7-year-old girl. As far as I know, historical records do not claim that she was brought back as a slave, but lived freely in Salem at that time with Colonel McCracken's family, and was buried in Evergreen, actually buried in Evergreen later, but first initially buried in the Revolutionary War cemetery. And when this cemetery was built, Dr. Asa Fitch Jr. felt that she deserved a better place than the Revolutionary War cemetery, so he brought her up here. The sad part is, over the years, we don't know where she is buried. We don't know whether she was buried with another family or whether she had her own stone or not, but that's the tale. Now, as the war went on, of course, I enlisted in the Continental Army and did end up as the surgeon in the Battle of Monmouth. And at the Battle of Monmouth, Colonel McCracken, who was also a Continental soldier, fought in the battle. Now, when he went out to the battlefield one day, he did not return. And my servant and I went out to look for him, and we found Colonel McCracken badly wounded on the field. His right arm had been badly shattered by a cannonball, a small ball, and so we carried him back to our medical tent where I removed the rest of his arm. Now, Colonel McCracken did live. He went on to have a good life in Salem, got into politics, was well known and loved by the people of Salem. So my medical theories and my medical practice came to good here in the community of Salem. Although basically I was known more for my military work and not as a doctor, although I continued to doctor over the years. Now, when the Tories left, their property came up for sale. And my wife and I, the former, Susanna Turner, did have some money, so we ended up buying, very cheaply, lands that were abandoned by the Tories who had left the community. And in the process, we were able to develop those lands and then to sell them for a profit. In fact, I owned most of Whitehall at one time, and other communities around. So the property that I own, some of it we set aside as glebe property. A glebe property is a piece of land, a parcel of land set aside for religious purposes. So we had glebe property in Salem, Presbyterian Church. We had glebe property in Whitehall. And over the years, the Williams family contributed many dollars to raising churches. In fact, they built the church, the Presbyterian Church in Whitehall. The Williams family was here for 4 generations, and we're standing in front of General John Williams's monument. That's my monument. On the hill, where the big cross is, all those bodies were initially buried in the Revolutionary War Cemetery. In the mound on the right, as you went to the cemetery, that was the Williams vault. But John M. Williams later on decided that after this cemetery had been built in 1849, and that he wanted to move up here. So the family picked, this is really the highest point in the cemetery. So all the bodies were disinterred from the Revolutionary War Cemetery and brought here. There are 14 stones, 13 around the cross, and the large monument here for General John Williams. The Williams family was very influential over the years. In fact, his presence, he was such a dominating person. It was felt that his spirit was everywhere. And his great-great-granddaughter wrote a book called The Gray Man. She talks about seeing his ghost in the garden out back of the mansion or someplace in one of the rooms in the house. And believe it or not, even in modern times, we still get stories from custodians at school and other people who, in the dark of night, when they're there, say they saw some sort of apparition in one of the hallways. So this story persists. And the spirit is there. I died in 1806. I was never one to sit around being idle, and I loved to work out in the fields and work with the people whom I had hired. We had a large staff, but I would go out there and work with them and get the hay up and hay piles and so on. But one day in 1806, a very hot day, I suffered heat stroke. Did not realize it. Went back to the house, but did not survive. So I really died at a young age. But my descendants have carried on, and over the years, they have done much for our communities. I did a lot at that time in politics. I was involved in local politics, county politics, state politics, and federal politics. In fact, when I was involved in the New York State legislature, when the Constitution was being discussed at one of our conventions, I was anti-federalist. Now, in case you don't know what that means, a federalist was somebody who wanted a strong central government. Having fought in the Revolutionary War and coming from England, where sometimes we were not very happy with the king or with King George, I was very concerned about the fact that the United States, or what we call the original colonies, might turn into another kingdom. I did not want that to happen. But I and my other representatives argued long and hard for what we call today states' rights. In our Constitution, it's today known as the Bill of Rights. We felt that there were certain rights that each state, every state should have, and that the federal government would not tell us how to do everything. We would govern ourselves in certain instances. So I felt very proud that I would do that. And then I switched parties. Once that happened, I was no longer an anti-federalist, but I became a federalist. So my history encompassed a whole lot of things for our area. The final heir, Marion Williams, married a popular congressman by the name of James. And James Parker and Marion in the late 1800s and early 1900s ran what we call the Williams Estate, which is now where the Salem Central School is. And the congressman dabbled in horses. He loved to raise good horses for harness racing. That was sort of his hobby. Turns out his hobby took a lot of the Williams money. But that's the way it was. But Marion, of course, gave money to the fire department. The Marion Hose Company was named for her. And she must have had an influence on James, her husband, because after she died, James put in his will that once he died, that the Williams Mansion and the 15-acre estate would be offered to the school district for $8,000, which was a lot of money at that time. But we have to keep in mind that really the school district, the school board, the community was looking for a better way to educate their students. Now James married for a second time, and when he died, the mansion was left empty for 2 years. I think probably we all know what probate is, and it takes a couple of years to work all the way through and the legalities. But at the end of 2 years, his wife then enacted the will, offered the money, not the money, but the school property to the Board of Education, and they held a vote, and they bought the property. And at that time, which was during the Depression, near the end of the Depression, the WPA made an offer to the school district to give them $200,250 toward building a new school, a central school, closing down all the one-room schoolhouses in the area. At the same time, the new centralized school law came about, and so the community held a vote on re-centralizing or reorganizing the school district into one school district, and that passed quite easily. The result is, what you have today is what you see on East Broadway. You pass the school property on your way here. I say the Williams spirit is still there because they love trees and they love flora and fauna. And over the years, I've had people visit our school and say, "What a wonderful piece of property! Why are the tree? The school I went to didn't have any trees on it. We barely had grass." But it's the result of the attitude of the Williams family and their love for all things of nature. And also good school boards who realized that that was important, and when certain trees died, they replanted them. And over the years, we have a lot of trees that are replanted. Most of the original trees are gone. Probably the only original trees left there are the few spruce trees out of back of the school along what used to be a little creek that ran through the property. So there you have it. The Williams family had a great influence on the community. They were important in developing our nation, from military to political to educational to artistic, and so on. I present to you the Williamses.